All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. This is Pure Live with you once again. And I do have a very special guest with me today. We have Rick Lockhart. I'm going to bring him on. So, Rick Lockhart II, let me say that in there. The current native of Chicago's Northwest Side, has been broadcasting in radio and live stream media for almost 4 years. Currently co-hosting 2 shows, including the recently launched In Black and White on YFNA News and Color Full Circle with Rick and Al. Please, everyone, welcome Rick Lockhart.
What's going on?
How are you this evening?
Miss Asia, listen, I'm doing well. I'm really excited to be a guest here on the show. Thank you so much for having me. I must say that your intro, that song March On, still gets me to this day. Every time I hear it, like I get goosebumps. It's such a powerful song. I'm so glad you included that in your intro.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my creative team's idea, actually.
Yes.
So,
but thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
You're welcome. No problem. So today, yes, ma'am. Today we will be talking about accountability. I called it "I've Got Your Back" accountability partners. And what does that have to do with it and getting us going on right now? Well, we have some serious movement going on at the current time, trying to make some things right, trying to change some things for the better, and in doing so, we have some harsh realities that we're facing. And in dealing with all of that and facing all those harsh realities, the question is, well, what now? What do we do? What should we be doing? What should we care about? What is working? What does work? What doesn't work? So, the reason that I came up with this particular topic is because I feel that we're at a point where we have to not just hold each other accountable for making some moves and doing the right thing, but we also have to hold ourselves accountable and not sit on our hands and expect things to change. You agree?
So, I think that it speaks volumes to what our responsibility is as people in our society. I think the only way that we're going to be able to find a sense of progress and continuing on is going to be through ensuring that we have the accountability piece for all of us to be able to really dive into what makes people tick and how to get people to move forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Of course, one of the things that everybody knows about, because people have been shouting off the rooftops and on social media everywhere, is Black Lives Matter, right?
Everywhere.
And then, then you have people coming in with all lives matter. So, in our statement of saying Black Lives Matter, are we saying that all lives don't matter? What is your take on the whole statement, Black Lives Matter?
So here's the thing, and we've talked about this. If I may, for a bit, share a little bit about In Black and White, the show that I host with my good friend and co-host Ethan Michael. We've created a platform that gives us an opportunity, and the reason we call it In Black and White is I'm black and he's white, but we get a chance to explore a lot of the racial injustices that come up, and it's a platform for white people to really get involved and start speaking up and speaking out. And it was evolved because, or introduced because of the situation that happened with Ahmaud Arbery. And when I gone on social media and saw that there really wasn't a lot of white people speaking up about the injustice, the agony, just the mere fact that this human being got murdered in the middle of the street, why not? Why aren't white people speaking up? So what that led to is us being able to create this platform and have these conversations and these discussions. With that, of course, we saw a myriad of things happen after that, right? We saw Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper in Central Park in New York, right? We saw a white woman try to weaponize police against a black man by saying specifically, hey, I'm going to call the police and tell them there's an African American man threatening me and my dog. And Lord knows how people, especially the police, flock over white women and their tears and their dogs. Then we learned about Breonna Taylor, and then we saw George Floyd. So all of this encompassed a situation and a speak out of, hey, Black Lives Matter. And here we are seeing that obviously black lives aren't mattering enough. So we need to speak out about that. I find that what's happening or what tends to happen is when people come or respond with all lives matter, and I'm sure everyone has seen the memes, right? Of, well, you wouldn't say at a pancreatic cancer event that all cancer matters, or if someone's house is on fire and the firefighters go to that house, you wouldn't say all houses matter. So why is this such a thing? I think what has happened is people have taken, what was it, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the Black Lives Matter movement was looked at as almost being a terrorist organization, and people were condemning the Black Lives Matter movement. Unfortunately, now we have a rally, a protest, an outrage of people simply just saying Black Lives Matter. And what I generally tell people who respond with all lives matter is, well, listen, all lives can't matter if Black lives don't matter. So get your life together. Um, I think so many people have seen that the when they see Black Lives Matter, they instantly think Black Lives Matter movement, right? That's the first place that their mind goes. And I try to share with people, and here's the holding them accountable piece. It's if you can't simply just say the phrase Black Lives Matter, remove the movement, remove that out of the way. Just simply say the phrase Black Lives Matter. If you can't simply say the phrase that Black Lives Matter, now we have a bigger issue. Now we have a bigger concern, and that automatically negates your all lives matter, right? You're completely null and void right now, and I think when we talk about that Black lives do matter, and I'm going to piggyback off of Norman's point that post that just came up there, his comment. We do have to include that all Black lives matter, because especially as we are celebrating Pride Month, Pride, as we are celebrating Pride Month, I think we in the Black community have an issue or concern or obstacle with understanding that Black lives includes LGBTQ community within the Black community, Black trans lives specifically within that community that are that's being targeted. We have to remember that, and again, holding people accountable. If you're going to say Black Lives Matter, you have to remember that all Black lives do matter. And all lives can't matter until we start understanding that Black lives are at risk. Black lives are in trouble, always have been. And now that we have the chance to speak up about it, here we go. So that was a long-winded version of an answer. My apologies. I had to get that. I've been on that. I've been on that.
You own it. I understand. We all have to address it. And then further into the accountability part, I guess some of the question is, what does that look like? What is our expectation? When we're saying, I'm holding you accountable to do your part, what does that look like? So if you're saying that to is it different for Black and white people? Is everybody held accountable to the same standard? What is your take on that?
Well, so I've been falling in love with Dr. Robin DiAngelo. I was introduced to her book White Fragility, and I'm a spokesperson for it. And I'm telling people she's not sponsoring me to say this. I'm really just falling in love with her work. And I just got done with a Zoom interview with Dr. Marshall from Evanston Township High School, who interviewed her in regards to her book. I think there's a couple of things here. When I got started with In Black and White with Ethan, I personally felt I felt outraged that white people weren't speaking up. I felt outraged that white people weren't as outraged as I was. And I felt outraged that clearly my white friends don't understand that situation could be me just based on the color of my skin, nothing else. And it for me gave me some pause, but also gave me the, hey, we need to do something about this. And that's how I reached out to Ethan. I hold my white friends accountable for being able to speak up and speak out against racism and being anti-racist versus non-racist, because white people created racism. We have to look at that as what it is. The system of racism and systemic racism was created by white people. So the accountability piece for white people is just that. You have to do the work of learning how to be anti-racist. You have to speak up and speak out about racism, excuse me. You have to hold your family and your friends accountable for racist behavior. That's the accountability piece. That's where their work is. And that's going to take a lot of self-inflection. That's going to take a lot of understanding of how whiteness and how being white has privileged them and prevailed for them. We were talking on the show yesterday about how some people, I've come across some posts or white people saying, oh, I'm tired of hearing about race again, or I'm tired of hearing about the protests, and I'm tired of hearing about Black Lives Matter. Well, here's the thing. Congratulations on your privilege that you don't have to face racism every single day of your life. Whereas Black people and people of color and even marginalized communities, we experience that oppression every single day because we're made aware of it, and we have to live in that. So I hold my white friends accountable to that responsibility. In regards to the communities of color, or specifically just Black people, I think it's very important. And as I've learned, and I talked about this yesterday on the show too, I've learned this. I think we have to be very observant of where we allow white fragility and white privilege to excel. I think it's very important for us to ensure that we're not catering to that, and that we take it on the responsibility of calling that behavior out amongst our white friends as well. When you look at how you engage specifically with white people, how Black people may engage with white people, right? We're taught to code switch. I know, Asia, you know about code switch. That's what we do, right? People, it's a thing. It's almost a survival technique. And I was speaking to a friend and a host of one of our other shows on YFNA News, the 13%. Her name is Cynthia McDonald. And in our discussion, we were talking about the realization that, if I cater to making white people feel comfortable, then I'm giving allowance for that white fragility. I'm giving allowance for that privilege, because I'm saying, in a sense, it's your world and I need you to feel comfortable in your world so you don't attack me, or I don't get the wrong end of this situation or this outcome. So holding Black people accountable in this type of a climate, when it's in and around race, it's important for us to be able to identify when and how we cater to that privilege that allows it to continue on and be consistent. Now, as far as that comment that just came up, I didn't get a chance to read it.
I'm like,
I missed out.
Well, so this is Dr. Margaret Jamal that said this comment. And I had her on the show last week. Holding men accountable about letting Black women be seen as baby mamas, etc. to white America.
Wow.
I do understand what she's saying.
Yes.
The image that we portray about our people has a lot to do with how others see us. Because that's what we're putting out there. Just ratchetness and just out there acting a fool, and tons of broken up homes and not being able to function. The assumption is that Black people as a whole, that this is how we operate, and it's not true. And we need to work harder at pushing forward a better image for ourselves, especially for our Black men, because they're saying they're not there, they're not present, they're not helping, they're not contributing to the community. What are you good for? What do you say about that?
So there's so much to unpack there. let me put this out there too. As we're continuing on, I didn't say this earlier, like I normally do and should. I am not the spokesperson for the Black community. Let me just put that out there. It's just, I'm sure you probably could, you know, I don't portray that my opinions are anything other than just that, my opinions. Okay, based off of the experiences that I've had in my life and the engagements that I've been privileged to have throughout my life. Okay. I was talking to one of my older sisters recently, and she mentioned, or it might have been on her show that it came up that, and I've heard this term before. Black men are seen as the white people of our race, and what she meant by that, and I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for that too. But let's break that down and look at that. When it comes to what Black men are tasked with doing, you know, we always look at, well, Black men should be the protectors. Black men should be standing up. Black men should, you know, do all of these things. And rightfully so, we should be doing it together as a community. Let me just say that. But we always find that Black women run to the support of Black men, but we don't necessarily see that same type of engagement as consistently as we do from Black men as we do with Black women. And what she meant by that is that as that being the perception that Black men aren't really, that Black men are looking to be equal to white people in our race of Blackness. And our search for that equality, we tend to miss where our responsibility is within our own race. In regards to Dr. Marshall, was that
Margaret,
Dr. Margaret. I think that it's that particular comment is a bit two-way. I do necessarily. It's 100% incumbent upon all of us to be cognizant of what we portray to any other race, right? I've worked with Mexicans, and I've heard Mexicans think that all Black people are lazy, right? We have white people thinking that the Black household is broken, and and that Black women are baby mamas, right? I think that the responsibility on holding any race accountable falls on all of us as a race of people together. However, I understand the need and want for the responsibility to fall on Black men. I'd say that again, we can push for that as much as we want, but at the end of the day, I think we're all being attacked from our community is being attacked from so many different angles and at so many different places that it's like someone has to identify where their strong suit is and go man that post. So if manning the post is holding this particular group of people accountable for their perception of us, then that's where you are. If someone else's strength is over with, you know, portraying what the image of Black people could be in some regard, right? Because we're not a monolith, then that's where you are. I think that our experiences collectively make us the most resilient and beautiful people on this planet. And if we hold white people accountable or any other race accountable for just looking at one particular piece of us and denoting that to be all of us, that's their loss. But, you know, also we could throw that right back at any race. So, you know, I don't think it's necessarily our responsibility. I mean, you don't call it out, sure, but if somebody's generalizing us, but at the same time, our responsibility as a race of people is to ensure that we are protecting one another from the hardships and realities of being Black in America or just being Black, period. So I hope that was able to answer our question.
And I'll let you know if she has a response or comment to that. So knowing that we are in this age of social media and everything is out there, everything is on YouTube. If there's drama to it, it's going up on YouTube. If there's something that people can pull out of it in some kind of way, it's going on YouTube. And a lot of the things that are going on YouTube, it's like, okay, yeah, we're catching the police doing wrong. Look at what else they're doing. They're taking out our babies. And unfortunately, we're also seeing a lot of, how do I put this? Behavior that makes us appear like unruly animals. and
Sure.
without context. So I'm wondering, how do you feel about what's been going on with it going into the looting and the trashing of the neighborhoods? You're in Chicago, so a lot of damage was done. But there's a reasoning for that. There's context to that whole situation. So, what are you feeling contributed to that kind of behavior?
Let me start by saying, personally, I don't engage in, nor do I condone the destruction of property in some regard. And here's what I mean by that. So, when looting takes place and rioting happens, we always tend to see it happening in the communities that are predominantly Black or communities of color. So we automatically, it's assumed, well, Black people are tearing up their own neighborhoods, right? And I don't know if you saw the video, and I can't think of the young lady's name, who went off about with using the Monopoly example.
Yes.
Yes, right.
I actually posted it on Instagram.
So,
Yeah.
and she said the social contract has been broken. So when you burn this, we don't own this, right? So you have
Right.
that aspect of it. I will say this when it comes to that. And I really hope that this message doesn't get misinterpreted, but take it for what it's worth. If you're going to loot and riot, especially when it comes to racial injustice, let's take the riot and the looting to the affluent communities. If you're going to do the riot and looting, do it in affluent communities. Don't do it in the communities of lower income or communities of color, because that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to get portrayed that Black people are animalistic, which we saw with the looting and rioting. Wasn't all Black people anyway, kind of along with the lines of the protesting that's going on in all 50 states and 18 countries. Just throw that out there. The reason why I personally would say, I don't condone it. That's not my calling in life when it comes to battling such issues. Right? I am good here having open conversations with people. I'm good with creating platforms for having conversations. I'd like to get involved with legislative work and congressional work and ensuring that we're pushing for laws to change that systemic racism and that we're holding our elected officials accountable. That's where mine is. But there are some people who their outspoken and outragedness is looting. For example, they don't have what is the it stuff to have. So this is an opportunity to go and grab it. Rioters are trashing areas because they're outraged and mad. If you take it to the white or affluent communities, I personally say that change doesn't come until white people are affected. And here's what I mean by that. When you look at the crack epidemic, it transitioned into the opioid drug addiction, and we got immediately there was healthcare platforms all over. What do you call it? Ability to help for rehab for the drug addictions, right? It happened once the opioid epidemic hit the white community, but when it was the crack era, it was the Black community, and nothing happened. We didn't really get treatment for HIV and AIDS until it became an outrage in the white community because it was attacking the white community, right? Then we got treatment for it. Then we have now the advances in medical technology that we have. If in the event you're going to riot or loot, don't do it in the communities that need the businesses to keep that community running. Take it to the affluent neighborhoods. Let them know how outraged you are. Because to me, that just seems, as far as if we're looking at on par for history, that's where your change is going to come. People are going to be deemed, as I saw the comment, animals regardless. And mainstream media. I'm not the one to jump down the mainstream media has an agenda, but I will say I understand and agree that mainstream media has an agenda, depending on which network you're watching, unless you're watching an unbiased news broadcast, which Keep in mind, YFNA News. Make sure that you like and subscribe and hit the alert button so that you can get updates from 13% as well as In Black and White. But yo, I'm putting this conversation out there openly. I don't condone rioting and looting. I don't engage in it. It's again not my thing. But when you have a community that has been this oppressed, when you have this community who has been just completely outraged at what's taking place, then this is what happens. This is the spurring of what causes that change or what creates that change. And I guess I should thank you, Norman. I should clarify. It shouldn't be necessarily affluent because here's my catering to whiteness. As I just posted on Facebook, listening to Dr. D'Angelo's interview, we correlate affluent and good neighborhoods to be kind of whiteness. I should rephrase that. My apologies. Let me say, if you're going to go ahead and if you're going to riot, take it to the white communities, not necessarily the affluent communities, but the white communities, so that change is affected because of what they've been the recipient of.
So let me ask you, are you encouraging them to go and loot white communities? Is that what you're saying?
Say that again.
Are you encouraging people to go and loot white communities?
I am not encouraging people to loot. I don't engage. I don't condone looting and rioting. Again, not my thing. I personally don't. However, we know that we've seen systematically throughout history that looting and rioting has been the catalyst for change. We saw it in the LA riots. We saw it in the riots in 69 and 68. The rioting and the looting has pushed for the change to happen. Peaceful protesting has not necessarily gotten the job done that we need to get done. So if you're not going to change, if you're not going to fix systemic racism in our country, and I say this all the time, if you're not going to attack this problem that we have in our country, then you're going to consistently see rioting and looting. If you fix the problem, then you don't have to worry necessarily about the rioting and looting. The only time you probably have to worry about rioting and looting is when white people are at a sports event and their team loses, and they flip over cars or whatever, because nobody says anything about them when they pull that stunt and they flip over cars and set things on fire, right? Same thing. They're doing it just because it's a game. The riots and looting that we've seen recently have been because of the systemic racism and oppression that we've now just recently seen, on top of the fact that our country, the citizens of our country are going through trauma right now. We are going through trauma. We have witnessed two murders, right there in front of our eyes. We witnessed two murders. We learned about Breonna Taylor's murder. We saw Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper, and we saw a white woman try to weaponize the police. We learned and we're experiencing that 100,000 people, over 100,000 people have died from a pandemic that probably could have been prevented. And the predominant of that are people of color, specifically right now, blacks. Our country is traumatized. So we can't sit back and say that the rioting and the looting is not going to happen. I personally would say, if you're going to do it, again, I don't condone it. I don't engage in it. But if that's what's going to take place and you want change, take it to the white neighborhoods.
Okay, so
that's just my opinion. That is just my opinion. Nobody has to agree with it. It's just solely my opinion.
Bottom line is, this is everybody's opinion. Everybody's shooting out ideas and opinions. Nobody is perfect, However, I think there's need for clarification, because you're saying that you don't condone that kind of behavior, but you're saying if you're going to do it, then take it here. So that kind of makes it sound like, although you won't do it yourself and you wouldn't back that behavior, but you are saying if you're going to do it, go ahead and do it in the white neighborhood. So it kind of sounds like you're condoning it as well, just in a different area.
So what I'm saying is I don't have the tools and equipment myself to stop it from happening. I don't. And
Right.
we don't, as I mentioned before, until we fix systemic racism, until we fix that, rioting and looting is going to happen. If we continue to see this oppression, if we continue to experience this trauma, then you're going to see rioting and looting. If you want
Okay.
change to happen from it, and again, we've seen rioting happening, and it's been the catalyst for change throughout history. So I'm saying, if it's going to take place, take it to the area that has the ability to speak up and speak out about changing racism. Black people
So
can't
I
fix
think
racism. Here's what I mean by that.
no,
Black
no.
people can't fix racism, and it's just like I said with the utilization of the other examples of when we saw change happen for opioid or drug addiction, when we saw change happen for HIV and AIDS medical advancements. If it seems to me that when white people get upset about something, they go and change it or they go and fix it. And as long as rioting and looting is taking place in the neighborhoods that they're not involved in or they're not in, then they don't care. And Black people can't fix racism. We didn't invent racism. White people invented racism. White people have to change racism. In fact, specifically, white cisgender heterosexual men set the standard as the status quo. And until they can fix it, then it's not going to be changed. So if rioting or looting is going to take place, the more effective place for it to make change would probably be in white communities versus communities of color.
That's an interesting point of view.
If we look at what recently happened here in Chicago, there was, and I don't know if you heard about the black and brown. I'm so sorry. I wanted to highlight, if you look at what happened with this black and brown war that took place very recently within Cicero, Little Village, I think even Humboldt Park was involved, K-Town, these areas. It stemmed from a kind of a misunderstanding, I think it was, apparently, I don't know, between a Black community and a brown community, a Hispanic community and a Black community. And there were misconceptions that were drawn from that. And it turned into an all-out war. Let me tell you, I live in a community that's predominantly Mexican with, I believe, a considerable amount of Puerto Rican and some Black speckled here and there. And my initial reaction was, I hadn't heard about my community being involved, but let me call my precinct just to make sure. And all of that stemmed from the looting and rioting that took place in one neighborhood, in a Black neighborhood, and rumors of it taking place in the brown neighborhood, which caused a all-out war between this Black gang and this Hispanic gang. So what happens there? You have two communities of color that are now at war with each other, and neither one of us can fix this problem. Neither one of us in our communities can fix the problem of systemic racism, which is the essential underlying root to all of what we have, what's going on. So at the end of the day, when you look at the looting and rioting that, again, is going to take place, I personally just feel, put your efforts where it's going to be utilized the best, if that's what you're going to do, and okay, don't.
Well, let's take a look at what looting is and what is done. So there's arguments that say, okay, well, now that people are looting and now that people are out there in the streets rioting, now they hear us, now they understand what's going on. At the same time, I do feel like the ones that are peacefully protesting are also making big enough noise into what's going on. If you look, you said you watched the news and you pay attention to the coverage. A lot of the coverage is covering the peaceful protesters and how they're being treated while they're trying to peacefully make a statement. And I've had this conversation with several people recently in regards to protest versus rioting. First of all, I don't think any one tool stands strong enough on its own. It needs to be backed by other things. So whether you decide to go buck wild and loot and riot, or you decide you're going to peacefully protest, it still takes another step. No, Asia can't change racism. No, rich can't change racism. We can't change how people feel. We can't change the fact that they have hatred in their hearts. However, I do feel that we can educate ourselves, make a loud enough noise so they understand we're not playing this anymore, we're not doing this, we're not going to take this anymore. And then taking it a step forward, we educate ourselves as to what the laws are, why people are getting off, why people are not being disciplined the way they should be, and go after those laws and make some changes, which has been done throughout history. We've had our peaceful protests, or I should say our attempts at peacefully protesting. You know, as we know, the most popular and famous of the names, you got the Rosa Parks, you got the Martin Luther King Jr., who, you know, the NAACP has been involved in these things, these marches, these protests. But I feel like people forget about the other part of it, and changing legislation. You know, you're making a bunch of noise. You burned down this business. You've gone off. Earlier I watched some documentaries surrounding the Rodney King situation. Complete and utter chaos, and people that had nothing to do with it, people that were trying to contribute and help, they ended up getting injured and beaten almost to death because people were just all over the place and crazy, and that contributes to the way that they're viewing us as wild animals. And getting arrested for looting and rioting isn't worth it when you can take it further and have some actions that will actually change legislation, that will change the laws. You know, how do we hold each other accountable effectively?
So there's a couple of things here. I think first off, let me answer a couple of things that I saw here. I strongly believe that looting is wrong. I don't want to get any misconception about that. I strongly believe looting is wrong. Looting is theft at the end of the day. And we've seen now that a lot of those individuals who were out looting, there are thanks to technology, systems in place that are able to track people who are looting, because people who are dumb enough to loot seem to be dumb enough to put it on social media that they're selling the items that they looted. So let's start there, right? So but we look at people who are looting. Let's look at them for a second, and this particular maybe demographic. When you look at individuals who are looting, you can take into consideration. You may take into consideration that maybe they don't have enough financial income, and here's their way to come up. Maybe they see an opportunity and they're taking advantage of it. Maybe that's the case. Has no idea, no clue, don't even care about what the movement is. This is just an opportunity because the rioters have broken everything. So looters have the ability to go in, like the young lady said in the video, walk through broken glass, grab some product, and go take it and go sell it so that they can get some money. What that says to me, just from looking 35,000 feet up, is there probably is an issue economically and financially that gives them the impression that this is the only way that they can do it. Well, where does that come from? Where could that come from? If you have a community that's not funded in or underfunded, that probably means that there's no funding in a lot of different things. There's no funding in housing. There's no funding in education. There's no funding in quite a bit of what certain other people or groups of people may have been privileged to. I will be the first to say that although we were in a lower middle class, neighborhood growing up, and even on the area of the West Side that we grew up, it was still lower middle class, but it wasn't low class or no class at all type of a neighborhood. I was fortunate enough that I was privileged to be in a position where I thought I would think to myself, as you mentioned, Asia, I want to go after legislative changes. I want to go after congressional changes. I want to go after aldermen and ensure that they are ensuring that the quality of their neighborhood is up to par. I want to go after the systemic racism that is built within the system that has held neighborhoods and communities of color down. That's where I want to go. But if you look at potentially people who have grown up in an area where that's not been the case for them, then why would you expect them to know that the change that they need to make is in going to legislators? Why would you expect them to know that? There's no funding in education. There is nothing there that has given them the information that they need to say, this isn't the right way. I need to go here. How can we hold them accountable for that? Right? So again, I don't condone it. I don't encourage it. But we have to understand, we have to take a step back and understand, where is this coming from? In addition to that, we say, okay, well, we need to educate our communities. Well, here we are again at the systemic system of racism that's put in place that does not give the funding, adequate enough funding for us to be able to get the education that we need. Most might say, well, it's there on the internet. You could just Google it. Let me ask you a question.
Google.
Let me ask you a question. Do you remember the party that took place on the west side of Chicago during the pandemic that put everybody in an uproar?
No.
Okay, so there was a party that took place while there was the pandemic stay at home. The pandemic was going on. The stay at home order was initiated by Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Governor Pritzker. And a party on the west side of young adults crammed into an area, this little house, or this little townhouse, I think it was. All, young adults, and they were all black. And it was outrage. Everybody was mad. These young people are dumb. They don't care. They don't, people went off on these young kids. And I was fortunate enough to come across someone who shared an opinion that I did, and she actually wrote a piece about it for the tribe. Her name is L. Harris, Veronica. And when she wrote it from a perspective that, how about we take a look at why these kids took it upon themselves to disregard a pandemic, completely disregard a pandemic, be encompassed and engulfed, sharing blunts and drinks and kicking it like there's not a pandemic going on. One, you have to remember, that generation, their whole mindset is PTSD riddled. They had to grow up from probably about a very young age, let's say maybe 5, dodging bullets, trying to stay alive, making sure that they were able to get to school and get home from school, that their little brother can get to school and get home from school, their little sister, or big brother or big sister, or they've experienced so much death and trauma amongst their friends and family that a pandemic meant nothing to them. We say that they're not educated, but in fact, it's not that they're not educated. There's just a lack of care and concern there. Take that demographic and put it in what we're talking about when it comes to looting. Instead of saying they're animals and we're there calling them animals, how dare us being in a privilege that we were in, that we didn't grow up in the same environment that they grew up in. We didn't grow up necessarily having to dodge bullets every day since we were 5, maybe later on in life, right? We didn't grow up where we didn't have funding in our schools consistently, or we had enough of a direction from somewhere that gave us the insight to say there's a better direction. So these individuals, they don't have that. And if we're going to call them animals, then I can't hold white people accountable for not calling them animals too. It's our responsibility in our community to say, what is it that we need to do to ensure that they don't make that mistake again? What is it that we're supposed to do to ensure that we're educating, we're providing direction for them so that they have a better chance at choosing something different if this were to ever come up again? And what that means is ensuring that those systemic racist financial systems that are in place are disbanded so that there can be funding for education for kids and young adults, and they can have access to quality living so that they know better. Because, of course, as we always say, when you know better, you do better, right? So we can't hold white people accountable for not calling our people animals if we're going to call them animals and not understand where their frustration is, where their mentality is for why they're doing what they do.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. So then let's dig further into the accountability piece. You were saying that, one of the biggest issues is that they don't have the education to know how to act or what's going on or what steps they should be taking to make some actual change.
Potentially. I'm not saying that I'm accusing them of that specifically, but that's a potential.
That's a problem that is out there. Correct. Okay.
Sure.
So with that being an issue out there, what are we? Because in what's been said by us both in this conversation so far is that everybody has a role. I think you kind of briefly touched on that in regards to you. You said, okay, this is my thing. I have a platform. I speak out about it on the show. This is what I'm doing. So we have different roles. And understanding that we all have different roles, different gifts and talents, what does that accountability look like? Uh, are we saying, since you guys don't know better, then we're just going to let you do whatever? Or do we come behind them and say, okay, well, we feel you. We understand what you're dealing with. Here's a better way of handling this. Let's get together and we're going to talk about how to get this changed. Or here's a list of things that we feel need to be changed. I have, so everybody remembers, I have a website, asiajamal.net or .com. I own them both. And and on there I have Asia Speaks. And so every week that we have a show, I put my little 2 cents on this blog and give information in regards to the topic. And one of the sites that I put on there is Black Lives Matter. And BlackLivesMatters.com has a list of things that they're trying to accomplish.
The 8th that can't wait?
I forget exactly what they called it. It's something about what does matter.
Okay.
Under Black Lives Matter.
Oh, got you.
Thank you, Dr. Marcus Moss, for promoting that on it. But
it's good to have, you got to have your people. You got to have your squad there that's ready to go for you. I love it.
Love the support. Thank you. And going on there, they have the list. They give you an opportunity to join and get information. They can send it to you, via email or whatever, your phone. There's so many different things on there. And what I appreciate about that is that they're educating you. They're letting you know, this is what we believe needs to change. This is how we feel it needs to change. Here are the efforts that are moving forward right now in order to get those things done. So as a people, it's some people like you and I who are educated. And those
I am. I'm not educated at all. I'm not. I still got work to do. Still trying to get through my education. Don't listen. Don't put that out there and set that bar so high that people think I'm educated. No, absolutely not.
I'm gonna have him on the show. How about that? So bottom line is, people that have the platform, people that have the knowledge, do we hold those people, including myself, accountable for putting that information out there? Or also, do we hold each other accountable for showing and giving the example of how we should be presenting ourselves? So we are not seen as inhuman. So we are not seen as a bunch of animals acting crazy. And even tying back into one of the earlier comments with Dr. Margaret Jamal was asking about, and also Norman was asking about, in regard to the portrayal of how others are viewing us and how we are being put out there. Would you say that people that know better, like you and I, that we should hold each other accountable in upholding those standards and getting the correct information out there that we know?
I do. I definitely do. Here's the thing. I don't doubt that you're not. I don't doubt that people aren't. People that have the ability to put information out there. I'm going to go back to the example of the kids, the young adults who threw the party. It's not like information about this pandemic wasn't out there, right? It's not like they couldn't just go grab the information. So it's a little bit more than just holding each other accountable for displaying information. And information can be obtained relatively easy. But I can give you algebraic equations all day long, and if you don't understand algebra, then you won't pay attention to me. It's going to be very important for us to understand. In fact, there's a gentleman who I connected with. His name's Micah, who has been working with the mayor's team in understanding how to utilize technology to get to the young adults and the youth of our city. I've also been speaking with my sister, who's a pediatrician here in the Chicago area, who is in a group of network of doctors, who is really trying to understand and break down how to get the importance of healthcare to that demographic. We can say all day long, healthcare is important, But if this demographic, and I'm just going to use this demographic for the sense of an example here, if this demographic is so PTSD'd from dodging bullets every single day that they're not worried about a pandemic, us just giving them information is not the way to go. That's not how they're going to get it. People who engage in behavior that is viewed as, you know, as horrible as looting is, 9 times out of 10, us telling them that looting is wrong and here's another way isn't necessarily going to be the information or the catalyst that's going to get that information to them. I would say that it's then important for us to understand who the key players are, who has the talent to be able to, and who are the visionaries who are able to get that information and translate it into terms and an understanding for this demographic of people, this group of people to understand. That's who we hold accountable, but that's what we do. What we do is we find who those people are, get them involved in the conversation, get them engaged with that conversation so that they can take it off and be the strong point that they're gifted to be. Their gift is getting that information relatively translated over to, then that's where we hold them accountable. And it's our responsibility, you know, because maybe those people don't even want to get involved, right? Like, why would I get involved? But at the end of the day, and when it comes to the accountability piece, we can put the information out there, and it's important that we do, because then they at least have, once they get to the understanding that, hey, this information is important, now they have several outlets to get it. But it's going to take us finding the people who are able to get that communication over to them so that they have the potential to visually see or learn that here's why this is important and why that is the wrong way. So we need you to come back over this way. Or we'll leave it as it is and let CPD find them on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter selling looted items, and then they go to jail, which I think Kim Fox isn't keeping them in jail long anyway for petty theft. So, you know, there's a whole other system of accountability that we need to look into when it comes to that too, our criminal justice system. So there's a lot of different areas. But like I said originally, we all have strong points. And it's important for us to understand where that strong point is, and we man that post. And we can hold other people accountable for manning their posts first. But if you don't know where your post is, then you can't hold anyone else accountable for theirs, because you don't even know where you at. And don't get me wrong, I'm still kind of learning which posts are the best ones for me. So I'm working on that too. I'll take that criticism. I'm cool with that.
Me too. We all kind of still learning. And I do want to touch on something that Norman said in the comments.
Sure.
That all Black Lives Matter, and you touched on it a little bit. The LGBTQ community. I want to make
Pride Month. Bring me into that conversation.
I want to make something clear. It is my strong belief that love covers a multitude of sins. This is what the Bible says. Okay, this is what I believe. And I feel like it's improving as much. If we are loving each other, if we are leaning on each other and taking care of each other, then we are not questioning the color of your skin. We're not questioning your upbringing. We're not questioning your desires or what gender you identify with or whatever is going on with you. That should not be a condition to receive that love and backing and support. That is my belief. So whatever it is that's going on with you, whatever your background is, whatever your religion is, whatever your gender is, whatever is going on with you should not be a condition in regards to you getting that love and support from your fellow brethren. That is my belief. So when in dealing with him saying all Black Lives Matter, first of all, I think it is unfortunate that that statement even has to be made. It is unfortunate that we have to shout Black Lives Matter. It is unfortunate when a group of people feel like we have to remind other people, hey, we matter too. We matter too. Because all of us do.
Asia, when we talk about accountability, I'm going to open up this door and I'm going to shut it real quick. It probably won't shut real quick, but I'm going to open it anyway. It is also incumbent in our community, when we talk about know better and doing better, and I'm going to get to Dr. Marcus' question there in a second. When we talk about knowing better and doing better, we are still a race of people that's really behind the eight ball when it comes to that simple understanding. We're one of a few. Because of our drive in religion, we tend to, unfortunately, we tend to disconcern ourselves and treat our LGBTQ community as subpar. We tend to marginalize our Black LGBTQ community as a race of people, as people who are undeserving of any of the benefits that we have of being human or being Black or being loved. What I think is very important and a key thing that I try to hold people accountable for just in general, is learning how to treat human beings like human beings. That's one. But also understanding where your privilege is. Because see, if you don't understand where your privilege is, then you are going to continuously heave that privilege all over any other marginalized community that you come in contact with that might be considered underneath the community that you're in. The Black community still, unfortunately, has struggled with accepting their LGBTQ community. And it's unfortunate, as you mentioned, that we still have to say all Black lives matter. But unfortunately, we do. It's the reality. And we can't sweep that under the rug either. It's very important for us. We understand that this whole fight right now is that Black lives matter. We get that. But let's also keep in mind that while we're fighting for Black Lives Matter, that all Black lives do matter. And if you have a privilege, understand what that privilege is. I try my hardest to daily look at instances and engagements that I'm in and account for the privilege that I have. Account for the fact that I have a loving family. Account for the fact that I have a home. Account for the fact that I actually have a man who loves me and wants to spend the rest of his life with me. That we have family that supports us. That I was able to acquire a great education and retain that education. That I don't have any physical ailments or disabilities. Those are privileges. And it's little things like that that people tend to just gloss over because it's normal for them. That's why it's a privilege. Hold yourself accountable for the privileges that you have to help you see the oppression and the oppressiveness of marginalized communities and understand how your privilege is benefiting you and taking away from their life. And that's something that I try my hardest to do it on a daily basis. And that's my own personal accountability. So yeah, we can say all day long that looters are horrible people and rioters they're tearing up things. But if I don't check the privilege that I had, that I never had to grow up in a situation where I wanted for anything, so there was no desire for that for me, that's my privilege. So it's very important that in our community as Black people, especially when it comes to our LGBTQ community, that we continue to incorporate their lives as part of the Black Lives Matter portrayal. In regards to Dr. Margaret's question, I have experienced racism in several different facets, whether it comes from police or going to predominantly white schools. I'll tell you though that what I'm learning from going through this reading of White Fragility with Dr. Margaret, how racism is committed every day. That white people are committing racist acts every day, unbeknownst to them, because we all think that racist people are bad people. You know, the misconception is that racist people commit these acts against you, when in reality, racism occurs in any time that white bias exceeds or exudes over my ability to be the human being that I am. So I will tell you that as I've learned that, I'm experiencing racism on a daily basis, as are all of us that are in the communities of color. And until we can get white people to fix that system, it's going to continuously happen. But biases are going to be there. We understand that. It's when you have, as she mentioned today in her interview, when there's power behind that bias, as white people have because of the structure of the system that's set up, then we have racism that occurs within or against the communities of marginalization or of color.
Yeah.
Norman said we experienced racism in our high school. Hey, Norman, listen, that was so long ago. I had so many Jack Daniels since then and vodkas with Tito's, and I don't remember much of it. But I also think that there was probably, a privilege that I've had. I've been able to either cancel out or I just didn't perceive it as racism because I catered to the white community so that they're comfortable. Right. And so to me, it wasn't racism. But as I'm learning now, again, y'all, I tell you, I'm not educated. I'm still educating myself. I'm still learning. As I'm learning now, those instances and engagements are actual accounts for racism. And I have been contributing to that racism to continue, and it has to stop. And I'm learning now how to stop it. So it could have happened, but I had a good time at St. Joe's. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about. I have Rick's information at the bottom of the screen if you guys want to reach out to him and check out his social media handles.
Thank you so much.
All that, so that I don't keep it up very long. We have to close out. I thank you so much, Rick, for coming on the show. We had a nice, healthy back and forth here. Good conversation. We're gonna need to continue this conversation another day.
Hey, listen, it's an absolute pleasure, Asia, to be here on your show. I'm glad I was able to. Again, I'll go back and read some of these comments. I'm sure there's a lot that I can learn from some of the comments that I saw, and I plan on doing that because I'm committed to holding myself accountable for that. Right. So for all of you all that have tuned in and shared comments of disagreement, I definitely want to look back at that, and I would love to continue the engagement, the conversation with you as well. So please, by all means, this video is shared. Also, this live is shared on my page, so you can click on my name and follow me there. Please also make sure that you tune in on Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. here on Facebook or on YouTube for In Black and White with myself and Ethan, and as well as YFNA News on YouTube, as well as once Color Full Circle gets up and running with Rick and Al, my wonderful fiance and partner. We're looking forward to getting that back up as well on Sundays, where we get a chance to talk about the obstacles and things that impact the communities that we identify with. So whether it be being male, being gay, being Black, being Christian, whatever it is, we talk about those things. And the full circle of it is trying to find solutions for that. So I'll be really glad to get that back up and running. But again, Asia, thank you so much for having me on to have this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everybody. This has been Pure Live, perfectly undefined, raw elegance. Undefined, raw elegance. I will break into that at another time. For right now, you guys have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Be safe.